G'day, fans, and welcome back, if I should say that, to another episode of DNA Reviews. We haven't been around for a while, and we certainly haven't been around to talk about good old Star Wars. But there's some really, really cool stuff coming out at the moment. It has divided the Star Wars fan community even more so than the mod squad from the Book of Boba Fett. Mr. Aaron, how you going, old son? How do you feel about the whole thing?
Are we talking about Star Wars? I thought it was some quiz show called or something like.
No? Yeah, I know, it's a pretty funny name when you sit and think about it. So good old Andor came out last week, and as we sort of noted in the promo for the show, it is easily the most unanticipated live-action Star Wars series ever produced. And in fact, when it was first announced, maybe about 3-4 years ago, I only knew of two people who said that it was the one series that they were really waiting to see. Forget Boba Fett, forget Kenobi, Andor was the one. Only two people, and I was one of the two. So yeah, it's kind of interesting. It's all come around now. We got to sort of see what it was all about. So for this episode, we're only doing episode 1 and 2, and we'll do episode 3 tomorrow because we didn't want this episode to go too long. But Mr. Aaron, what are your thoughts on the good old Andor, mate?
Well, like you said, it dropped like a bomb, and it's been interestingly discussed online. I haven't seen super positive reviews. I've seen a couple of negative reviews and a lot of middling reviews, and we're going to go through it and have a talk about what we thought. It is interesting because this was about the first TV series they announced out of the gate for Disney Plus, wasn't it? And it's taken 2 years to get to us.
Yeah, got held up because of all the COVID thing and whatever else. So we're talking about episode 1 specifically tonight, which is called Cassian. And for those of you wondering, of course, we got the old spoiler alert, which is kind of funny because there are actually no spoilers to spoil. So it's an interesting sort of show because for the most part, when you sit and think about it, everything's brand new. Aside from the Cassian character himself, everything, the planets, all the other characters, it's a lot to absorb. If you love your trivia, your brain's going to be leaking out your ears going, who's this person? Who's that person? What's the name of that person? It's an absolute mind spin and a half. So I found already I'm struggling to try and remember certain things with the series, but I guess it'll all come to us later on. But we're bound to be in a situation where you and I are having a conversation. And you go, that guy over there, who was that? Because there's a whole lot of them I just can't remember.
I find if you try and just memorize it a Bix at a time.
Very good. So no Bix, because that's the name of the main lady. So for those who don't know, so Andor's come out, as we said, and whether you like it or not, and we're obviously going to discuss this in detail, it has done one thing that none of the previous series have been able to do. They have divorced themselves from what I class as the Disneyverse. Right? They've removed all the cuteness factor out of it, and unlike a lot of the previous series, which had all based around children. So you remember, if like in Mandalorian, you got Grogu, in Bad Batch, you got Omega, Book of Boba Fett, you even had like the Tusken Raider kid, Obi-Wan or Kenobi, you had Leia. At least this is a lot more adult, and it is not designed for the common person out on the street. It is strictly aimed at the fan base. Now, whether that works or not, it's hard to say. And of course, there's a few things that, like, Aaron and I have not discussed this at all, our thoughts and views on the episode. So we're going to be learning everything here tonight as we go along, and we're going to break it down shot by shot and scene by scene. But I applaud them for that at least. But whether it works overall is yet to be seen. What do you reckon?
It is an interesting one. When you say they've aimed it at the fan base, you've got to remember George Lucas originally said these are just kids' movies. Now, I do wonder how many kids would be watching this and thinking this is rip-roaring adventure and exciting, because I think one of the issues with this is probably the pacing and maybe the slowness it takes to get going.
Yeah, is clearly the biggest issue. A lot of people, I think, will say that at least with episode 1 and 2, they could have condensed it into one episode. I know a lot of people have had theories about how things could have started with episode 3, which we'll cover off tomorrow. Yeah, it is an interesting one because I think it's a 13-episode series. And one of the key things that people did say is that if they had just released episode 1 by itself and you had to wait a week for number 2, the whole audience would have just deserted it and left it. So, yeah, for that reason, it hasn't like come out of the box like absolutely like in a screaming blaze of glory. So, but we'll go through that in detail. Yeah, and you're right, Dale. The 3 episodes are an arc, which work quite well. But of course, it's an ongoing story. and we're going to go through it in detail and see what we think. Very, very cool. Yes, Gavin, adult kids, can't argue with that. First thing that popped up that I saw is when you're doing the flash through all the characters at the start, B2 is actually called, I think it's B2EMO. See, I'm trying to remember all this shit now. Appeared at the start, which I thought was a nice little gag. I don't even know if most people even picked up on that. Did you see that at all?
I did see that, and he was one of the droids. He reminded me of Vincent from Black Hole, actually. Maybe.
Yeah, it's very funny. Yeah, it's very funny. It's a couple of people have mentioned about good old Black Hole. It's amazing how a movie from the 70s can just make, oh my God, this is like the coolest thing ever. But one thing that has got a lot of people very excited is that the very start of it was like actually very much like Blade Runner. So poor old Andor, good old Cassian Andor, was all on his own here, and I can't remember don't remember the name of this planet. But yeah, this invoked a hell of a lot of Blade Runner vibes. So I assume you would have picked up on that.
Yes, noticed that straight away. And where do you head when you're all on your own on a deserted planet?
Well, hang on, I'm going to get to that in a sec. This is a cool part. So the main thing here, I mean, we're on Morlana 1. I had to think of what the name was. There it is. Thank you very much. BBY, the dating system here, is now being canonized. And I think that was really interesting because people out on the street, the general public will have no idea what that means. That obviously means before the Battle of Yavin, which is Star Wars A New Hope. So that's set at 0 BBY, and the next year after that is 1 ABY. So the fact that they did this, because it's saying it's 5 years before Star Wars, but the fact they canonized this, I thought that was really interesting because that, as I said, they didn't even explain what that was. It's just BBY. That could be anything. So it really is a case of the fans will get it, but the public won't. So what do you reckon?
Yeah, I thought it was a big mix of stuff because when I saw that, you get that, and you've got Morlana 1, but it's also the Morlana corporate zone, which reminds me of Blade Runner, but it also reminds me, you go back to the Trade Federation and all that kind of thing that sort of seeped through Star Wars since they'd made the prequel. So it really was one of those things where the writers have gone, oh, we'll take this and we'll take this, and they've incorporated everything quite nicely.
Yeah, and so what they've suggested in this series is that there are corporate sector authorities everywhere. So the CSA actually is a canonized thing that started off in the Solo books in the early 80s. So various sectors of the galaxy, the Empire has control, but they sort of farm out who has the authority. And in this case, it's the Premor or the Preox. It doesn't exactly roll off the tongue. And that's who is in charge of this particular vicinity, as it were. So they're working on behalf of the Empire, but they're sort of just been, it's like, what would you call it? Sort of like external contractors, if you will. Would that make sense?
Private security. They reminded me of the Bespin security guards, actually.
Yeah, exactly right. So, yes, they have the authority of the Empire, but they're not actually the Empire, which I thought was actually quite interesting because through the entire series, all 3 episodes, including the one we're discussing tomorrow, the Empire makes no presence whatsoever. No stormtroopers anywhere. So if you're into the cosplaying and you go, oh, I want to get dressed up as a stormtrooper from good old Andor, no, at this stage, you haven't got anything to dress up as. Mall cops. Yeah, exactly right. Like the sound of that. So, as you were saying, of all the gin joints in the world, every series now seems to have a pub. We're always going to pubs and bars, aren't we? We could do it in Boba Fett. We do it in Mandalorian. We're doing it everywhere. So
we did it in Obi-Wan. That's where the Inquisitors went the first thing looking for Jedis.
That's right. So that's what I thought was so funny. So we're doing the pub thing. And, and of course, as we saw inside the pub, it wasn't really much happening. It was a bit of a quiet sort of place. But what this tells us is that with knowing anything else, you can tell just from his demeanor that Cassian is a loner, right? Yeah. And that gets more and more emphasized as the series goes on. And I think that's actually quite impressive from his character perspective to say, well, okay, because we said by the time he gets to Rogue One, he's still on his own. And ironically, the person he finally connects with is Jin, and they freaking die together. So I thought that was actually quite interesting. So, but yeah, he's looking for his lost sister. At this point, we don't know who that person is. But at least we've established that good old Cassian does come from Canary, the planet Canary. Now, in this series, there's a lot of flashbacks going on. And what I've done, I've removed them all and put them in a certain spot later on and just grouped them all together because otherwise it'll be just jumping backwards and forwards, okay? So if you're wondering, oh, there's a flashback bit there, where am I, why aren't I discussing it? That's the reason why I've done what I've done. And as mentioned, he's looking for the Canary girl who left several months ago. I thought that was interesting, months. Now, because that's an Earth time frame. And, of course, when you say months in the Star Wars universe, is that months for that planet or months galactic time? I mean, I know why they've done it because from our perspective, it's just easier to understand what's happening. But I picked up on that straight away and I go, very rarely do they use a time system that actually we can relate to. So I don't know if you noticed that at all.
Yeah, they have in Star Wars, they have the countdowns, and the countdowns aren't in seconds and minutes, but they actually are timed in seconds and minutes when you watch them. So it is kind of that weird sort of real world, but use different terms to make it sci-fi. Have a doctor, but call it the space doctor to make it sci-fi kind of thing.
Yeah, like even in A New Hope, when they said, "Oh, we'll get to Alderaan by 0200," it's like 0200 what? So they didn't put the hours in, so they were very clever about that. I looked at this guy. I actually thought this was Margot Robbie when she first popped up. I thought, "Oh my god, they got her in the show. That's fantastic." And as we discover later on with Kerry, which is Andor's sister, who got stuck on the planet, which I've forgotten that name too, she clearly was able to escape. So she's got a whole story there that we know nothing about. So hopefully that gets fleshed out as time goes on. What do you reckon?
Yeah, I agree. I was distracted by the flat top as well.
Well, so she serves the drinks. She just puts them on the hat and just walks around and goes, there you go. But if you've got a short person there, I'll just lean forward. Yeah, it doesn't end well.
I did notice with this, the cast in the background, there weren't as many aliens, say, as you get on Tatooine or other planets. So what I think that meant was the ones that we did see were quite good alien designs.
Yeah, and I heard a story that apparently the director is more, or the writers of the director is more human focused than alien focused, and that works actually because ultimately Star Wars is a human story. It's like when they took the mask off Darth Vader. Some people said, "Oh, I should have been an alien under there." It's like, no, it's a human story. You put the aliens in to sort of like flesh out the worlds and make it a bit more interesting to look at, but they're not the central focal point. And I agree with you with this. They've been very selective as to where they put them. Which has actually worked out quite well because ultimately it's a human thing. Now, this was interesting. I don't know if you picked up on this. This is the bit where he walks away up to the camera and the two guys that he spoke to at the bar sort of having a go at him, right? There was no editing in this whatsoever. And at this point, you still can't even see them. And he's just standing there looking at the camera trying to just disappear, even though he can't go. There's nowhere for him to go. Did you pick up on that at all? I thought this was very, very clever filmmaking. Instead of just cutting around all over the place, they just left it on him for at least 20, 30 seconds. So I've got to give him credit for that. So, the best editing is sometimes no editing. What do you reckon?
There were some really interesting decisions. I think sometimes they worked and sometimes they didn't work. I am jumping forward a bit where the same kind of thing where he walked away and you don't realize that the people who are yelling in the background are talking to him until I didn't realize anyway, until sort of halfway through the conversation.
Yeah, there you go. So one of the things that this show, we said, this is why I was keen on it a few years ago. So for those who don't know why some people had a bit of a thing about this particular program, in the show Rogue One, or the movie Rogue One, Andor makes a specific point of saying to Jin that he's done things for the Alliance he's not proud of. And of course, at the start of the movie, he kills the dude, right? And when they said they were doing a series on this character, I thought, well, they could really go into the dark part of the entire story because it's not a show that the kids are going to watch. The public isn't going to watch it. They may watch the first episode and go, yep, no, it's not working for me. There's no spaceships, no lightsabers, no Grogu, right? They'll just tune out. So that means they can add an element of darkness into this. And I don't mean light darkness. I mean like nasty darkness, and do things that you don't normally get to see. Yep. And that's exactly what happened. Some of it is subtle and some of it is right in your face. And when I saw this, I go, I don't recall seeing this anywhere in the Star Wars universe. A dead dude with the eyes open. And I thought, that's something you do not. I don't recall in any live action, even like animated series, where they did this. And the guy's dead and the eyes are open. I go, that is very left field. Did you pick up on that?
I did see that. I didn't think straight away we haven't seen that in Star Wars before, but now you pointed out it is unusual. It is always, I think, more dramatic where someone dies and they have their eyes open because it's more realistic. People don't die and then close their eyes. True,
but in the Star Wars universe, by and large, you don't normally see dead humans, right? I mean, when you do, it's like Kylo Ren's of the world. It's a dramatic thing, okay? It's just like, oh my God, the guy's died, the eyes are shut, everybody's happy. But to have the physical corpse sitting there with the eyes open, even though it's a complete unknown character, I thought that was something that you don't normally get to see. And I thought I applauded them for that because they have said, we can do this because the kids aren't going to be watching. And of course, it's not the first time this happens. So I thought, good on them. And it's just little things along the way. You go, okay, that's different. That's new. You won't see this in a Boba Fett series or a Mandalorian series. Imagine like in a Mandalorian series where the characters died and their eyes are open. And it's like a human character. So I thought, yeah, well done to them for that. So, and to push the nastiness even further, when like Andor's got the gun to the dude's head, and I must admit, it did kind of look a little bit like Han Solo's gun. I mean, I know it's not, but it kind of looks like it. You're thinking, what's he going to do here? Now, in Rogue One, he killed the guy in cold blood. Sure. And this guy's saying, hey, we'll make up a story. I'll pretend that this happened. Everybody's good, right? And of course, as it turned out, he freaking plugs him in the head. I go, how good is that?
Yeah, it was.
That is so anti-Disney. Like, that's absolutely spectacular. What do you reckon?
I was surprised. I was wondering what was going to happen. And also, Lucasfilm went for so many years of trying to change the Han shot first and make Han more family friendly by doing that. And then they've got this guy here and they've said straight away, this guy's an anti-hero. He will kill people cold blood. He is the good guy, but he does stuff that isn't good.
So he shoots a guy in the head who's unarmed and is begging for mercy. That is something you just do not see. And I agree with you. Yeah, you're right. They lightened up all the stuff for Han shooting Greedo in cold blood, which wasn't, because Greedo was clearly pointing a gun at him. And here they've gone the complete opposite. So I don't know how far they can push the envelope as far as future episodes are concerned. But when I saw that, I loved the idea of seeing things I don't expect. And that's the problem that a lot of the previous series has had, the unbelievable predictability. And The Mandalorian is one of the worst examples of that. You can work at an episode for the first 5 minutes. You go, yeah, this is going to happen, this is going to happen, this is going to happen. And it's all good to go, right? Whereas this, they've said, okay, now we're going to go a little bit left field on a few occasions because we can do it and get away with it. And I thought, at the very least, fans, not everybody will go for it. I mean, some people will be like, oh, it's not really the Star Wars that I like. But in that case, you just don't watch the series. But I thought, no, well done, guys. Very impressive.
The other thing, it's basically the continuation of the first scene that he's in. So right up the front, they've said this is what this series is going to be.
Good on you, Christy. Yes, with the levity, it needs a warning. That's a fair point, actually. Yes, and I agree with you on that one.
Just imagine all the kids sitting around the TV waiting for Grogu to chase a butterfly or eat a frog, and then they get someone shot in the head.
Mate, there you go, and dead dudes with their eyes open, all that sort of stuff. Yeah, you are right. I mean, I don't know, like at the start on Disney Plus where it has warnings, flashing lights and all this other stuff, whether they have something up there. But for me personally, it kind of works for me. So we're off to Ferrix. More planets we've got to learn now, and the Morlani system. And we sort of covered this part off already. Once again, the world building in this is really, really cool. Clearly, it's a part of the universe which is always dull. It's always overcast. If it's not raining, it's miserable. The whole show is just like this. There's no beautiful, happy, sunny days, no butterflies, as you said. And I thought that was really, really cool. And as mentioned earlier, this is what the Pre-Mor do. They look after all these areas. So this is Ferrix. And very, very cool. And, of course, that led us into the droid B2. Now, this, I don't know if you, I saw this coming a mile away, right? I said, I bet the dog takes a leak on the droid. And they're Corellian hounds. So as we saw them in Solo. So why they here is anybody's guess. But so it was an obvious joke, but as I said there, but I thought it was a good one.
I think it's the same as why Jawas on different planets. They just make it there. The other thing I don't know if you picked up, and this is, I guess, world building and bringing everything in. When they were in the bar at the start, the music they were playing wasn't the same music as was playing in Maz Kanata's bar, but it was almost like it was recorded by the same artist almost. I was like, oh, that's pretty nice callback. I did see the dog going to urinate on the droid. I didn't pick the droid was going to then turn around and electrify the dog. I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, I picked that up from that's what R2 would do, right? Get the thing up. And so I saw it coming a mile away, but it was still a good sequence and it worked quite well. Dale said cold-blooded murder, swearing and socks. Because we'll talk about swearing later on. The socks. That's right. Yeah, because he's got his socks on. This ain't your grandpa Star Wars. No, it is not. And it won't work for everybody. So much like using on a tangent, how Star Trek Discovery was vastly different to all the Star Trek series that have come before it or after it. And a lot of fans said, no, I can't handle it. It's not my thing. I think this series may be in the same boat, at least so far. So it's a little bit too different, and it will work for some people who like a change, but it won't work for others. So I think that, as I said at the start, it will alienate some of the fans. Some people say, no, it's just not my cup of tea. Whereas other people, like myself, will go, this is so refreshing. It's really, really cool. But, of course, we're still only barely into the first episode. I think this was interesting. So, Cassian's living in the ship. And I thought this whole thing of, heroes living in squalor, because you remember Rey, she was living in a busted AT-AT, and Kenobi was living in a cave, seems to be the common Star Wars trope. No one seems to be living in a mansion.
I think it's more the hero's journey. Living in the lap of luxury doesn't often inspire you to be greater than the person that you're born as, But if you're living in squalor, the only way is up.
Well, that's true. And of course, as we discovered with Andor, I mean, his life doesn't really get any better. I mean, he eventually joins the Alliance but it's not like he moves from that ship to something a bit more like penthouse related. I think that he just lives a very, very miserable sort of life, just doing the duty, which I thought was because you can sort of see, okay, I can see how he is today. I can see how he's going to be in 5 years' time, and not a lot changes. I mean, his career path may change, but his personality doesn't really.
Yeah.
So you made a point about saying, like, he can relate to the droids more than he can with people. And as you said, and you're not the only one, a few people have picked on this, more old Bob from Black Hole than Vincent, because he's a bit beat up and he's a bit busted. But Dale, who's watching the show, made a mention that he reminded me of him of old Bob. And someone yesterday said to me, old Bob. So, so a lot of people are sort of thinking the same thing. So, what do you
I
think?
think if they rebooted Black Hole, that's the robot you'd get, because they basically make him the same but get rid of the goofy eyes.
Yeah, exactly right. And B2, unlike, say, your BB-8s, which roll around and cute and all the rest of it, B2, because he works in a scrap metal yard. I think you can find over a period of time, you go, you know what, I can relate to it a little bit. You know, he's very he cares about Cassian a fair bit. Obviously, he's got a bit of emotion, same as K2SO will eventually have as well. And I think that kind of works to a large degree. He's not the hero-saving robot that is going to come up and just, Cassian's in trouble, I'm just going to bolt down there, get my jets out and save the day. He's got a purpose. And I think the fact that he has very limited sort of like operations within the world actually works for him. So he's just there. He's a companion for Cassian, probably more than one of his best friends, effectively, but doesn't overshadow the show. What do you reckon?
And isn't not the robot's fault, but not the brightest of robots. And even Cassian at points is saying, well, here's the backstory if this happens, and don't slip up, and don't say that, and don't do this. And I thought that's really interesting that the robot, the droid, has a choice of what it can actually say rather than just obeying Cassian.
Yeah, and also he has to do recharging as well. One of the things we never really see is what happens when robots run out of charge. So it was kind of cool. So it's worked for me. You know how some robots you can go, oh my God, that's just pissing me off. Like you see, it was a DO or something from Rise of Skywalker, just like from the outset, it's he just pissed me off, dude. But B2, I think it's fits in quite nicely, and isn't going to overshadow and be the cutesy droid throughout the series, at least at this stage. Anyway, we'll talk about the world building earlier. I really love this. I mean, characters everywhere. I'm not sure how they did a lot of this stuff. A lot of stuff is handheld. So I don't know how they use the volume, if they're using the volume, and they would have had to for this, how they managed to do that. Because if you're hand holding like this, then how does the volume sort of like work in the background? I just can't figure that one out. But I looked at this and I thought, this is grouse. You would swear Black and Blue, you're on a foreign planet. And as you said, it's mainly human, but there's a couple of aliens chucked in there for good measure. And it really sort of worked for me.
It had a lot more filmed on location look and feel to it than a lot of the other Disney series. And it also was good because it's an alien planet and it's a Star Wars planet, but it's not like a lot of the stuff we've seen before.
Not even close. So Dale's Menace is no volume. It's a real set. Okay, that's fair enough. I don't know how they would have done. I mean, I know they filmed this in England. You can tell because all the English accents from the supporting cast. So if they went ahead and built everything, they obviously said, nah, stuff doing this volume thing, we want to do it for real. Good on them for doing it too, because I looked at some of that footage and I go, how in the hell they done that? It's just beyond me. So now if you're into the costuming, you're a costuming person, you go, oh my God, I can never get enough gloves. And you'll think, what was the deal with this? It's like glove. Pick a glove, any glove.
He's
so,
obviously
a lot of time is spent establishing the environment. Some would argue probably a bit too much time, but it kind of works.
He's obviously on his off time a wicket keeper for the cricket team.
What happened to the dude up there? Is he off sick or something? Like I just realised there's an empty sort of thing there. So in fact, wouldn't you just, if you're a little kid, you'd go in and just mix all the gloves up and put them on different hooks?
Yeah, well, at least they're identifiable because they're all different colours and shapes and stuff. But yeah, it is interesting the world building they did. Wouldn't it be funny if that was a Chekhov's gun and in the last episode or something, they go, if only we had 50 pairs of gloves.
Now, it's funny, right? In some shows, like when they did like Attack of the Clones, Revenge of the Sith, they filmed in Australia, so they put in Australian actors, right? And you Jack Thompson playing Clear Glass with a really, like a dodgy ass Australian accent, he's trying to do an American accent, but it kind of hasn't worked. And you get like Omega from Bad Batch, who is the thickest New Zealand accent you could ever imagine. And obviously the Americans think, oh my God, that is so like foreign to us. It just sounds awesome. In this show, as pointed out by this guy, don't ask me what his character's name is, all the British and the Scottish accents, they must have just said, just go for broke, put them on as thick as you want. And I found it was much stronger than usual. Now, I don't know if it's intentional or they just said, don't even bother trying to neutralize the accent, just speak in your normal natural voice. But there was a lot of English/Scottish accents in this particular series. And I thought, oh, well, good on him for doing it. It may irk a few people. Maybe, as I said, the Americans go, oh my God, that is just so foreign that it just sounds outworldly. What are your thoughts?
Well, it has a bit of, like you said, the filmed in Australia to it, where it probably worked. It worked for me. I didn't mind it, but it probably, when I watch the prequels and you hear the Australian accent, you kind of cringe. No one else does. Everyone says, oh, it's fantastic because it sounds alien. And I think it's the same thing here. It's fine with me because, you know, everyone over the galaxy is going to have different accents. If you're watching it in Scotland or Ireland or whatever, you're going to, oh, no, this is not good kind of thing.
I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. You're right. They'll be going, oh, he's from Glasgow. He's from down the road. He's got that dialect, that sort of that twang in the voice. And you go, I know exactly where he came from. He's not the galaxy far, far away. He doesn't come from Ferrix. He comes from like 3 kilometers away. I don't know. Maybe. But I was interested. I found it interesting they didn't even bother trying to hide them. They just said it, let them go. And it wasn't just one person. There was a whole lot. If you remember the guy when he walks in the bar, you know, he says, oh, yeah, no guns, no communicators. Straight away. I mean, he's got this thick English accent because obviously they filmed it in England. I thought it's not a bad thing. It was just an interesting observation. So Gavin said, sorry, you're going to say something?
So I was just going to say it's the same with overseas. Everyone's like, the guy that sells death sticks is cool. And we're like, nah, he was selling them on Summer Bay a week ago. So
you want to buy some death sticks? No, anyway, don't worry about that guy. He's gone home to rethink his life. Gavin said, we now have Andor, we need Jen Erso. Yeah, well, she's not meant to pop up for the next 5 years. So, but there's an interesting contrast, as we discover later on, between Cassian and Jin. And I thought, oh, that's an interesting sort of link. I hadn't seen that before. So another thing that this series has done, so we've increased the violence a little bit, increased the world building, the atmosphere. Unfortunately, we haven't increased the pace. The pace is as slow as a wet week, but it is what it is. But one of the things they haven't done, which you do see in a lot of the other series, where the fans go, oh my God, I'm not looking at the main character. I'm looking all around them. I'm looking for the fan service. What nuggets, what Easter eggs have they chucked in? So I can just go, oh, have you seen that? Oh, have you seen that? In this series, there's hardly anything. It is really, really dry. And good on them for doing it. I mean, one thing that was picked up is there is a lugger beast here on the left. I just chucked this in for good measure. From The Force Awakens, Tito is writing this when he kidnaps BB-8. And I thought, it's not even like in the front. It's just like chucked in the back there. And I thought, good on them. They haven't said, oh, no, we're going to chuck in like, R2 units here and like spaceships there and this here. And it's very, very select. And I think people who are looking in the background could be a tad disappointed going, well, where's the fan service? Yet other people will say, that's actually good that they haven't done that. They haven't just pampered to the nerds who want to go, oh, look at that, oh, look at that, oh, look at that. And I thought, well done. What do you reckon?
It was definitely, the feel and look was more in the Solo movie era of Star Wars rather than the original era of Star Wars, where a lot of it looked like stuff that was on Corellia and things like that, rather than, there wasn't anything from Tatooine, there wasn't anything from Hoth. So I think that's a good thing too. I agree with you.
Yeah, exactly right. And because one of the things a lot of fans have been saying for years, we want to see something that's away from Tatooine and something a little bit different and something a bit unique. And I must admit, I don't need to see a lightsaber to go, oh my God, that's the greatest thing ever. And now that it's been delivered, and hopefully they'll build on it, that they've obviously said, no, we want to go in a completely different direction. So this could be the future of where things go. And it's possible that Lucasfilm/Disney will look at how this show works and whether they'll say in the end, oh, yeah, this is a good direction to go in. We need to have more original things rather than cementing it in worlds and places with characters that we know really, really well. So, yes. Hang on. What? No Easter Mickeys in a Disney production. No, there's definitely no. Unless he's one of the ones who gets plugged in the head later on. So we're off to Morlana 1, the corporate security headquarters. And so they've got the what used to be a variation of the Republic gunships up there, which I thought was kind of cool. And of course, that I think led into this dude. So and the whole world building here. And you notice all the computer graphics are all 1970s quality. How good was that?
Yeah, no, I thought that was pretty amazing. I actually like this dude. Cyril Khan, I think his name is, isn't it?
Yep.
So I thought his story arc was quite interesting, being stuck in the middle of bureaucracy and frustrating uselessness around you when you obviously are aspiring to be a good worker. And, you know, he is sort of, I guess, the type of person who welcomes the empire and the order and things like that. And he's obviously stuck in this system where he feels better and that they should be doing better than what they are. So I thought this was quite an interesting character.
Yeah, totally agree with you. I mean, he's clearly got career progression on his mind, but he's obviously, for whatever reason, maybe got knocked back from the recruitment agency or just didn't get where he wanted to go. So he's playing the gung-ho, follow the rule book officer with the Pre-Mors. And clearly he's a bit of a try-hard. You know, he even made modifications to his uniform and all the rest of it, which I thought was just really, really cool. And, of course, that's a complete contrast to Chief Inspector Hine. The discussion between these two, how grouse was that, right?
Yeah.
Like Khan wants to do like raise reports and get there's a murder suspect out there, and Hine goes, nah, don't worry about it. It's a accident. It was an accident, just like a misadventure. Forget about it, file it away, and who gives a shit? I love that it was such an interesting contrast between the two characters. What do you reckon?
It's exactly what I was thinking too. Almost they were more interesting than Andor in this episode, where you've got different ends of the spectrum. I was full on expecting him to walk out and call the Empire and say, we've got a useless guy that's not doing anything here, kind of thing. So I did think the dynamic was great. Isn't he the person that all the people working with him would absolutely love?
Yeah, so you do wonder what the respective futures of those two characters will be. Okay, now we know later on Khan has a bit of a hard day at the office, whereas Hines nicked off to the Imperial thing. And it's all about, I'm not getting paid enough for this. That's his perspective. We're not getting paid enough to find murders. These two guys, it didn't like him anyway. Who cares? Yeah. They're gone, out of the picture, file a report, bury it somewhere and be done with it. Whereas the other guy, Khan, clearly wants to make a big thing of it, right? Make a mountain out of a molehill effectively. And as we know later on, it doesn't exactly go the way he wanted it to go. But you are right. It's as was mentioned. Sorry, wrong one here. Kirill Khan is wrong that I find this fascist wannabe dictator attractive. Well, yeah, that's exactly what it is. And some people out there will go, I can relate to this dude because where I work in my real life job, I'm really much by the book, follow the processes, follow the procedures. And they can say, this dude is on the right track. He's almost like the General Hux, of this particular era. And so I think the audience will be divided as to who they sort of can relate to the most. So it's very well done.
It's interesting that a lot of people identify with him, even though he's sort of the one portrayed as the irritating character. I did love how, his boss was saying, our job is to not let the Empire find out about any of this because it just causes too many problems. And you think about that and you're just like, oh, wow, like they really aren't doing a job that the Empire wants them to do.
In our world, it's classed as paperwork and red tape. And as Tracy said, good to see Tracy joining us. So relatable. We've all worked with someone like this, and that's exactly right. So clearly, Khan's gone in, Cyril Khan's gone in. So this is the problem. We need to fix the thing. And good old Hines said, nah, don't worry about it. He's like, mate, shattered his illusion. So he's just gone off his own tangent. He's like, oh, dude, that's not going to end well.
What I actually thought was going to happen after that scene, I did think Cyril Khan was going to go above his head, and just as he's about to go off to his meeting, the Imperials come in and go, what's all this about? And they slam down a report, and he just goes, Khan!
Well, that's what Colin's done there. Yeah, exactly right. Khan, for those who don't know, it's a Star Trek reference, Star Trek 2, The Wrath of Khan, funnily enough. So there you go. So he just changed the spelling of Khan from that into this Khan here. And yes, exactly right. But yes, you're thinking, okay, where is this going to go? Anyway, that was on Morlana 1. We go back to Ferrix. So in this instance, we are jumping backwards and forwards a little bit. We get introduced to Bix Colleen. That's an interesting name. I don't know how many people are going to remember that in the future. And clearly she has tenuous links to the Alliance, and Cassian, which I wasn't aware of, hasn't joined the Alliance yet. I thought he'd been a part of the Alliance for quite a long time by the time we saw him in Rogue One, but that's not the case. So I thought there was an interesting link to say, okay, for him to get where he wants to go, he's got to go through her. She goes through another person, and it just goes down the line from there. But so how did you find her, dude?
It's interesting. When I first saw her, I thought, oh, this is going to be the secret sister. Obviously, it turned out straight away not to be.
Good on you.
I thought she was fine. Again, for the episodes being sort of long and slow, I still didn't think a lot of the characters got defined as quickly or as well as they could have been. So she obviously is the plucky girl who's the hero, but that's a trope rather than building up to that or showing anything in the episode that it goes that way. It just happens because that's what she's doing, kind of thing.
Yeah, and there's a lot of dialogue in this particular series, and some of it is murmured, right? You have to go, what do they say? And some of it's incidental, some of it's background, but there's some of it's actually quite important. And of course, we've got to work out, okay, their relationships all over the place. This person's like, hanging out with this person. This person has a crush on this person, et cetera, et cetera. So, and of course, that's where this dude comes into. I can't remember who he is. But I don't know if you picked up on this. There is a little bit of fan service here, the Wabani run. And of course, Wabani, as Gavin will know, was a planet featured in Rogue One where Jyn Erso got rescued. I thought, that's a nice little nugget for you. What do you reckon?
Yeah, I thought that was interesting. It was one of those things straight away. they try to set up this, I guess, friction between Bix and Cassian and him, and it was pretty. I thought it was pretty sledgehammered and obvious what was going to happen straight away.
Yeah, some of it was a little bit predictable. It's like he clearly has got the crush on Bix. You know, they obviously have a bit of a relationship together. Cassian's stuck his nose in. I was like, oh yeah, that's not going to end well. We were talking earlier about how they've really stuck with the 1970s graphics, which has really put it into the real world of A New Hope. And of course, I love this. It's air traffic control in the galaxy far, far away. It's exactly what it looks like. How good was that? It really
does. Yeah, when I saw that scene, I was actually thinking that, and I was also thinking of in Close Encounters when they're watching the alien ships. There's some very similar reflections on the screens, and the setups are the same. And I don't know if that's a coincidence or a homage at some point. You know,
can you imagine when they said to the visual effects department, "Oh, we need like the air traffic control screen," and of course they've whipped up this gorgeous CGI 3-dimensional. This moves around, and they've said, "No, we want like vector graphic shit, 2D only, just with boxes and stuff." And the CG guys would have gone, "Are you kidding me?" It's like, that's hurting me, mate. I want to make it more flashy and dazzling. Can I put color in? No, just blue. Oh my God.
I did love as well, and I think this is where Cyril is getting all the character building. How they say, we've got to identify this, and they're like, that'll take hours. He's like, okay, do it.
Yeah, exactly right. And I'm going to bring up a bit of a point about that later on, because that's really interesting. We're seeing something you don't normally get to see. So Andor's ticking all these boxes at the moment, despite the fact that it's a slow pacing show. Is not in a hurry to get where it wants to go, and that's probably at the detriment of the audience's interest. So a lot of people would have tuned out halfway through. But you got to give them credit. They've really thought this through in great detail. With that in mind, you were talking about aliens earlier. You don't see a lot of aliens. This one was a good one. So it's a cute moment with Nurchi, who's on the left, and Vetch, who's on the right. And I like that. And once again, even that alien's got an English accent. I mean, how good was that?
Yeah, I thought that was funny. And it was a night for a darker show. It was a nice bit of comedy, that whole sequence as well, I thought.
Yeah. And of course, this just re-emphasizes that Cassian's got a lot of wheeling and dealing scams going on. And as we discover later on, he's definitely got the whole criminal thing going on down pat. And he's taken the guy's deposit, and he said, the wheels are in motion. And it's like, you can't even get the deposit back to the dude. So I don't know what was going on there, but
I bet.
Yes.
I bet he owes Kanja Club money too for some Raftars or something.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, absolutely love that. Very, very cool. And once again, just to re-emphasize it, you do get to see some good old-fashioned high-tech. And it looked like it was like Morse code. Did you notice that? You can tap, 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 tap. Yeah. So
it's not Morse code. It's Rebel code or Imperial code. Dags, come on, use the terminology.
Yeah, all right. Very, very cool. Colin said, yeah, reverse engineering Star Wars style. And it works because it really grounds it in the real-world thing, which is absolutely spectacular. Now, this is what you said earlier. In everything we've seen in the Star Wars universe, especially with the bad guys or the authorities, right? Everybody's all gung-ho, militaristic. You remember, like in Force Awakens, when Hux is talking to all those stormtroopers, every single one is all attention, they're all in the zone. But what happens when people aren't interested and they don't want to be there and they just want to slack off and they're just like not interested in what's going on? And that was this sequence here. And I love the fact he's got blue noodles. So forget the blue milk. The milk's out. He's gone the blue noodle route, if you get that. And I love the fact that it's like everybody's apathetic. Nobody gives a shit. And this guy's on his friggin' phone over here. I thought that is something you have not seen before. And yet that is unbelievably true to life, in my opinion. What do you think?
Yeah, it reminded me of in the first Avengers movie where everyone's doing all this stuff on the heli character and there's one guy playing Galaga on one of the screens. These are the guys that would be trying to beat each other on Galaga while everything's going on.
Yeah. And I love the fact that they say, oh, Cyril Khan's coming along. Okay, everybody pay attention. Of course, Cyril comes in all gung-ho. Yeah, he wants this checked, wants that checked. And they say, oh, we can't do this, we can't do that. I really like this because this was different. Every time we've seen anybody in the Empire, they've always been like really like pro their job, if you will, for want of a better term. They did the opposite.
The only other time is the officer where they see the base on Hoth, and he's like, "Oh no, that's just pirates or something. Let's not bother checking that one out."
Yeah, well, he probably really believed that. I mean, he said, "Who the hell would bloody build a base on Hoth?" But I mean, yeah, have these guys just be like, "Oh, do we have to? Do we have to?" And yeah, you're right. That was echoed earlier on when he told the guy to go through checking the flight logs and whatever else. Yeah, it was a nice touch because it's something you don't normally get to see, and it just goes to show that in the Star Wars universe, not everybody's having a good time of it. I like this one. It was like a Wilson's parking garage, and I looked at this and I thought, I wonder if people are going to be sitting there going, "Oh, this ship is from this movie. This ship is from this show. this ship is from, actually, that looks a bit like the Razor Crest to a degree. I didn't see anything in particular. I don't know if you noticed anything.
The one thing I saw, and it wasn't the ship or anything, but it was just the way you entered it. I used to play Shadows of the Empire a lot, where the start of that, the Dash Rendar's Outrunner would be parked, and you'd sort of run around the croppy things and run up the middle into it. And there was a scene just like that in this, and I was like, oh, is it going to be the... No, it wasn't, though. But they're very good ships in there. Not things we've seen before, but they obviously fit into the Star Wars universe.
Yeah, and Dash Rendar's ship, I think, was the Outrider. Sort of just clarify that for the nerds out there. And you mentioned earlier about the Kanji Club dealing Rathars. I'm thinking, oh, the other guys, and it was the Guavian Death Gang. I've been sitting there trying to stew over it. So, yeah, very, very cool. So, once again, they've added in a lot of detail. Now, some of it you could argue, is it necessary? Is it not necessary? We know the ship is being tracked because I've just seen it in the air traffic control earlier on. And, of course, Cassian's now changing the flight logs, and he's refueling it as well with this dude here, who's clearly not happy about the fact that he's swiping his ship from time to time. So,
yeah,
it's another thing that's like, it's good for the detail, but whether it was necessary for the story, I mean, it's probably designed to say, for people going, well, what about this and what about that? And I think they're trying to address all of it at once. And maybe it works, maybe it doesn't, because once again, it's a lot to absorb. It's like, okay, where are we? What are we dealing with? Who's this dude? What's the ship we're in? And so you could argue maybe this part wasn't necessary, but I thought it was good that they added it in.
Well, the other side of, I guess when we're talking about, I guess, the whole security thing, when you look at the other side with what will be the rebels, but when you have Cassian talking about his friend, and they already have the stories made up as they go through them, where he's like, yeah, you came to my house, you drank too much, da 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 da. I thought that was good character stuff as well.
Yeah, no, exactly right. And then the other guy embellishes it accordingly. So, yeah, clearly they've been down this path a few times before. And in the Wilson's parking garage with all the ship, when they did the reverse angle, I was thinking, is it the front of a Y-Wing? What do you reckon?
It looks like the proto Y-Wings. There was Lego of them. I can't remember what they're actually from. It does look like it, though. It's obviously one of the sort of leads up to a Y-Wing type thing.
Yeah. So I thought it was kind of cool. So that, believe it or not, was the first episode, right? Now, as I said, we took the flashback stuff out. That's going to be appearing a bit later on. So if you're wondering why all that was missing. In the end, not a great deal happened. So Cassian killed the two dudes at the start, or killed one guy. Actually, no, he killed them both, even though one was an accident. He's being tracked. The Premors, I'll never remember that, are trying to track him down. And while he's here, he's got the box, which we haven't really sort of discussed yet. This Imperial bit of technology that he's trying to offload. So there's a fair bit in play, but it's a bit on the slow side. So I'll talk about Christie's Crimson Yours later on, but just quickly with episode 1, how did it work for you?
A little bit of an analogy. When I went and saw Star Wars and Empire Strikes Back, a movie came out that was advertised as being very similar to that. And when I went and saw it, it was a big letdown. That was Blade Runner. Because the ads for Blade Runner made it look like Harrison Ford action movie. And when I went and saw it, it wasn't. It was a Harrison Ford sci-fi, film noir, totally different type of movie. And I think this might be the kind of backlash we're getting on this, where everyone's expecting Star Wars and we've got something totally different. And it's not bad. It's just not what people were expecting. And I think people who have been affronted by it straight away, it might age better than some of the other Star Wars series have.
Yeah, I can imagine somebody's already thinking, oh, when I do a fan edit into a movie, I'm going to cut most of this out. But it's an interesting one. It's very, very, as you said, it's very, very different, and it won't work for everybody. Some people are going to be probably not even get into the second episode. They go, you know what, I'm over it already. It's a tough one. It really is. So, yeah. But, yeah, what you said is completely relevant. So, all right. So, you're going to say something? No. All right, cool. All right, so that was episode 1. Okay, so it's come and gone. Not a lot happened. As I said, spoiler alert, there wasn't any. So there you go. And that brings us into episode 2. What that would be me. So we kick things off. Now, I love this bit, right? This is on Ferrix. How do you signal the end of the working day? You got this guy whacking on this bloody thing. It's like, it's their Ferrix's version of Big Ben. And we said this a few times, actually. So what do you reckon on that?
I think it's important. I did think this will have story relevance down the track, and it kind of did with the resilient rebellion, or them using the percussion as warnings. The other thing we didn't talk about, which is through both these episodes, what did you think of the music in this? Because this was totally different from a Star Wars soundtrack.
Exactly right. And there are occasions where you go, they've gone really left field. The end of this episode in particular, they've gone, oh, okay, I've never heard that before, and actually made a point of noting it. I think the music's actually worked out quite well. It certainly fits the theme of what we're looking at.
Yes.
It's
Yeah.
everything's different. The characters are different, the worlds are different. They're like the aliens are different, and the music's different. So to a large degree, and I was going to discuss this at the end. To a large degree, it's almost like a science fiction show, but it's set. What has like Star Wars overtones. If you didn't know what this was and you just came into it from the outside, you wouldn't even register this is Star Wars related.
There's no Star Wars. There's no Star Wars themes. That was the other thing that kind of made this different, which I should have mentioned when we were talking about episode 1. But I thought the music was good. I thought it wasn't like sometimes when you don't get John Williams, you get this wannabe generic score that just isn't as good. This was really good music. It just wasn't anything we've heard in the Star Wars universe before.
Yeah, so they've like broken all these molds everywhere. So Tracy, regarding the first episode, started watching it and stopped because she was getting distracted, which is not hard to do because it is a bit of on the slow side. Watch with headphones on. I think that's actually a smart move because, as we said, there's a lot of mumbling that's going on and there's a lot of dialogue forcing you to concentrate, and was hooked. So I'll get to you in a second. One thing I did find is I've seen this episode twice, and it does need a second viewing. Right, there's so much to take in on the first time around. Second time around, it sort of helps a lot. Sorry, go for it.
The one thing I was going to say, if you haven't watched these yet, why you're watching us, but this is the first series in for a long time. I put the Disney Plus subtitles on, and it was much better with subtitles. There was actually dialogue that I didn't even hear in the audio mix, and then when I put the subtitles on, all this extra stuff came up. And I actually only did it because I wanted to see if the alien stuff had subtitles, but it didn't. But by putting it on, I picked up a lot more watching it that way than just watching it without the subtitles.
Very groovy. So I would agree with what Tracy said with headphones. I mean, a lot of people can't do that, but headphones, you do tend to hear a lot more. And I prefer to watch things with headphones for that very, very reason. But yeah, you are right. There's a lot of stuff buried in them, kept it real world. So instead of saying, I'm going to go down the street today, really, really big and boisterous, they just mutter under their breaths because, a lot of it they're all doing, it's all very surreptitious and like on the QT. So, yeah, I'm not surprised by that at all. So anyway, we get into episode 2. So they bookend each other quite nicely when you sit and think about it. The thing that popped up is that when Bix says to the other guy, whose name I still can't remember, why don't we do something fun? And I go, yeah, Ferrix doesn't seem like a lot of place that would have a lot of fun stuff going on. So, I thought it was a funny line. So I thought, where are they going to go? I don't think they've got a time zone in there anyway.
I think his name was Tim, wasn't it?
Tim, yeah, Tim. Thank you very much. Yep,
yeah.
Very, very cool.
So it was obvious they have some kind of relationship, and he's the one that doesn't want anything to do with the rebels or her helping anyone or doing anything like that. And he's obviously, from what happens, a straight Imperial guy. And it was one of those things. I thought it was going to deteriorate pretty fast.
No, I don't know if I necessarily picked up. I didn't necessarily pick up on that. I picked up on the fact that he's clearly got the thing for, and he's suspicious of Cassian. Yes. And she's obviously kept things from him, and that's probably just purely keep it all in house. Don't tell anybody, people they don't need to know. Maybe you're right. If she had told Tim, maybe he would went off and tell the authorities.
When I say Imperial guy, I mean he isn't someone who was going to join the rebellion. He is just going to live as things are and not rock the boat.
Yep. No, exactly right. Chrissy said, she wasn't a fan about the muttering. It would be a nuisance if you have hearing problems. Maybe I agree with Aaron, put on subtitles if you can be bothered reading all those. Speaking of which, so I do like the fact, because everything's in Ouroboros, sometimes you do need a translator. And so the pre-more authority and then the pre-ox, all these words, these pre-this and pre-that. And I thought it was actually quite neat that they did this, actually, because we needed to have an idea as to what's going on. And, of course, Tim now realizes that the Canary thing, who's the Canary dude? And he goes, it must be Cassian. So he's going to go out and do what he needs to do. Now, this, of course, introduces Marva, who at this point we got no idea who she is. I thought they were calling her Mother. And I thought, it can't be Cassian's mother. That doesn't make sense because they were on the tribe on the other planet. That didn't register at all, but her name's Marva. And I found out, too, her apartment where she lives is quite large. And I don't know if that's intentional or maybe she'd made a lot of money from scavenging or whatever else. But she seems to live in some pretty luxurious quarters. What do you think?
Yeah, I thought the same as you. I thought it was Mother to begin with and then realized it really couldn't have been. And you're watching the flashbacks at the same time, so it becomes pretty obvious. I didn't really notice that she was in a bigger place than usual. I just thought they lived in ships kind of, and she might have had a bigger ship for hauling stuff or whatever. I didn't know till later it wasn't a ship. It was just a settlement building or something.
Yeah, but it's quite large because you look at they've got rooms and they've got corridors, you've got Cassian's room and all the rest of it. It's like, oh, okay, so clearly she's got a few dollars stashed behind it. Now, of course, we're racking up the tick points, right? First things we've ever heard or seen in a Star Wars show, dead bodies with eyes open. You got the tick on that one. Someone mentioned socks, which we haven't seen yet, but yeah, there's socks. You can tick those as well. And of course, one of the things is like, oh, we've just grounded it in a real world scenario is swearing. Bastards. Mate, where did that come from?
Well, usually it's moof milkers or nerf herders or something like that. But obviously she doesn't. She just cuts through the crap right to the hard stuff.
More bastards. And it was like, well, we're not. I mean, George Lucas must be sitting there going, no. What are you doing, mate? No, where's the old nerf herder when you need it? Oh my God.
Where's voodoo?
Can you imagine if she said those pre-more nerf herders? That just would have. That's laughable. But they've said no. We're gonna go earthbound here. What do you reckon of that?
Yeah. Do you know what? They were all scruffy looking.
They're all what?
Scruffy looking.
Very, very good. And of course, that's not the first time we actually hear real world swearing. And I thought that may piss a few people off and go, oh, hang on, no. It's like, it's very funny. We're heading down a similar path of what they did in Star Trek Discovery, introducing the F word, which just really alienated everybody, right? And they said, nah, that is just not what we hear in this universe. But with this show, once again, it's aimed at an adult audience, and they've gone down this path for better or worse. And I think it was more of a shock than anything else. It's
it's the Simpsons rule. If it's been used on The Simpsons, it's probably okay for Disney Plus, and they've used.
Yeah, but in the galaxy far, far away, as we've said, even though they're human beings, it's a completely foreign universe, right?
Yeah.
And when you use certain terms that ground it in real world, now some things you can't avoid, like in Attack of the Clones when they said Shmi when picking mushrooms, you go, oh, hang on, you can buy those down at local Woolworths, right? Instead of putting a sci-fi-ish sort of name on them just to try and make them sound really interesting, like as we mentioned earlier, blue milk, right? They couldn't use white milk, they used blue milk, make it look alien. So when you use terminology that is real world based, you can detract you from the oh, I'm supposed to be in this completely fictitious universe, and now all of a sudden I'm hearing language that I use against my kids, so to speak. So I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but it's certainly a shock to the system, and that may, have some people go, oh, okay, I didn't see that one coming. So, and of course, if it happens here, will it happen in other shows as well? So, yeah. Yes, and Dale said, yeah, Marva was a great character. Yes, she was indeed, and she's got more to come, and there's more swearing to come as well, especially in the third episode, if I'm not mistaken. Very, very cool. So, when Cassian holds Bix's hand, she needs a new name. Bix is just a bit hard to speak. Clearly, Tim's watching from a distance. You can see they're coming a mile away, right? That was a little bit telegraphed. He's going to run off and tell everybody, yep, he's the guy you're looking for. And he's not the droids you're looking for. He's the Cassian you're looking for. And, of course, that was never going to end well. So, which I thought was kind of cool. And, of course, yeah, so Tim runs off down to the phone box. And as we saw in Mos Espa in the Book of Boba Fett, phone boxes. I love it. Good old-fashioned phone boxes, mate. How good is this?
Yeah, he's calling up 007.
And the fact that the alien on the other side on the left of him is having a look out, hey, dude, what do you think you're doing? I thought this was ingenious. In the modern world, in the modern Star Wars world, to be on comm links and all this sort of shit. No, he's just gone to the local payphone. I thought that was excellent. I really enjoyed that. What are your thoughts?
It's one of those things in science fiction where often we get technology that outdates what they're using. It kind of reminds me of sort of almost the bases on Outlander or stuff where they're out in the middle of nowhere and it's an industrial place, so they don't have the technology. It is a very different world from what Leia was growing up in on Alderaan, isn't it? It's like a totally different sort of universe within the planet within the Star Wars universe, which is great because it should be limitless what they can do, and we always go back to Tatooine.
Yeah, exactly right. I totally agree with you too. And it just has a really hardcore grittiness to it. And once again, that sequence there really had the Blade Runner thing going. It's dark and it's like, I think it's moist and it's just, everything's busted and broken and a very used universe, as you said. Guys just made a point of saying, I think the swearing in Star Trek Discovery fits okay. The swearing is okay. It's when you use the F word, that's what threw everybody off. There's some words you can get away with. I mean, you have used low-level swear words even in with the original cast in the movies. But once you start,
it's a whole different program talking about that. But when they started using it in Picard, Nah. Yeah.
No, exactly right. So it's sort of like a little bit like, okay, yeah, Gene Roddenberry turning in his grave, and maybe George Lucas when he heard, oh, you don't use the word bastard, as you said. Clearly, they were never planning to use real world swear words in any of the series because they would have done it a long time ago. They wanted everything to be sort of, sort of in the space, bit of bantha poodoo, right? You could have just said shit, but no, we're going to use that instead. Doesn't matter. We move on. Now, this one I found interesting. We now learn that Cassian actually has an extensive criminal record. But of course, Jyn Erso also has an extensive criminal record, right? That's the reason why she was locked up in Wabani in Rogue One. So when the two of them hook up with each other, right, they're actually like kindred spirits. Who knows? They may have actually even passed each other somewhere in their travels. Robbing some like old grandmother or some bank somewhere on some planet. So I thought that was really interesting because, as I said earlier, I thought Cassian had already been a part of the Alliance for a long time at this point, but he hasn't. And I thought this was interesting how one emulates the lifestyle of the other. Did you pick up on that?
To be honest, I wasn't thinking about that, so I didn't. It is interesting, though, that they are living parallel lives and they will meet up, and it'll be interesting to see how far this series goes and how closely they diverge. Will they actually mention her, or will she not even be part of this series? So
no, until they need her because of her connection to Galen Erso on the Death Star. At this point, that's if they did, that would be a fan wank, as you would say, putting in a fan service that doesn't need to be there. Okay, because clearly when they meet in Rogue One, it is the first time they've ever met or crossed paths, and that's very, very clear through the entire thing. You going to say something?
I was just going to say we do know that Saul Guerrero will turn up later.
Saul Guerrero, yeah.
And he knew her as a child, and he also knows her father. So there could be something down the track because we're heading towards Rogue One. I don't think she'll be in it, but they might mention him, especially her father or something.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The Saul Guerrero connection, absolutely, because I think he's in the trailers or something. So, that part certainly. But I'd be like thinking, why would you mention Jyn just because she appears in a movie 5 years later? It doesn't mean that she needs to appear here. So we talked about dudes. So this is like with Cyril Khan. Okay, he's a real hardcore. Want to be the dude who gets serve the public trust, protect the innocent. Uphold the law. If you're a fan of RoboCop, and then you bring this dude in, Linus Mosk, right? Now, he should have been in the Empire, right? Yeah. He was grouse, this guy. Absolutely fantastic. And as he said, pockets are fermenting. And he's talking about the resistance from the peasants. And I thought, dude, if only you knew what was going to happen in a few years' time. But this guy was excellent. Once again, got the English accent coming through. And he was absolutely pampering and saying everything that Cyril wanted to hear, Khan wanted to hear. And I thought this guy was grouse. What did you think?
I loved him too, and you just realize he's one of those actors that when stuff goes wrong, he can go as red as beetroot. As soon as I saw him, I was like, this is going to be really interesting as we go through this guy's character arc in the series, because when they bring in a character actor like that, you do know what the role is going to be, and even though it's predictable, you look forward to it.
I loved it. It was fantastic. And of course, we'll cover it off in a few minutes' time, the pep speech that Khan gives. Oh, just absolutely spectacular. So every once in a while, you need to be reminded. For kids, for those who aren't aware of it, this actually is a Star Wars series. And it's the first time we've seen the Imperial logo in the show. And I thought, it's a Star Wars show. It's easy to forget, I tell you what. So, it's this big bit of tech. We've got no idea what it does, what it's meant to do. All we know is that Cassian's got it and he wants to sell it. So it's like the headpiece of the staff of Ra from Raiders. It's important. Everybody wants it, but what it does, who knows? Who cares?
So there has not been a lightsaber or dark saber in sight in this series, which is quite good.
Yeah, indeedy, duty, diety. Now, this might have I'll just chuck this in for good measure, right? We talked about Blade Runner earlier. It had the real Blade Runner aesthetic, and I thought even the gun in this shot looked very much like Deckard's gun from Blade Runner. So I thought I just chucked it in as a comparison. I know the nozzle down there is completely different, but the thickness of it and everything, I don't know, just chucked it in. But just one of those moments ago, even the color scheme, you could think that'd be a Blade Runner gun. So,
that's what I was thinking all through the movie. The color scheme has a lot more in common with Blade Runner than a lot of the Star Wars stuff. So I thought that was pretty cool.
Now, this one's interesting. Yeah, so we got out the dealer is turning up, right? And I thought, first things first, the cockpit looks very, very much Millennium Falconish, so it's good to see we've got that sort of like that aesthetic there. And the computer says he's got to land 2.3 clicks away. And I was thinking, because earlier we mentioned how we talked about months, like there's 7 months. Okay, we've got the real world time zone. For the most part, distance is not mentioned in the show, miles, kilometers, and that sort of thing. So 2.3 clicks. And I thought, how far is 2.3? Is that a 2.3 thousand million meters or 2.3 centimeters? What do you reckon of that? What do you reckon of that, dude? Clicks.
Someone will probably correct me here. I thought clicks were what they used in military here for a mile. So 2.5 miles away.
It could be, and you're probably right. I mean, like as we said earlier, they try to avoid real world distances and times and stuff like that, because otherwise it grounds it in our reality.
Well, the thing with distances and stuff, we have miles and meters and feet and kilometers, and it's confusing enough on Earth if you go to somewhere where they're not using the common system that we use. Imagine the Star Wars galaxy where they just use millions of different systems. They're never going to be able to explain it in an episode of
Yeah, you could have a long discussion about how time zones work and all the rest of it. So, but I thought it was just interesting. 2.3 clicks, and I go, all right. So there we go. 2.3, yeah, done. I'm not there. Where am I? It's like, I reckon the writers really stewed over that and go, what do we do? It's like, some countries use miles, some countries use kilometers. We invent a distance, that doesn't exist in the real world. People go, well, what does that? Is he on the other side of the planet? Is just 20 meters away?
The only one I can think of is Battlestar Galactica that tried that with Yaren and Centons and things like that, which was sci-fi enough to sound cool, but similar enough for everyone to get what they're talking about. And then even within that, they'll be talking about Yaren, and then a character will go years because no one was there to
confuse the shit out of everybody. So there you go. A click of the fingers at light speed. Absolutely love it. Anyway, it was just a little thing. I just thought it was just funny when he said, he's like 2.3 clicks. What does that mean? Anyway, so Luthen Rail, yet another name you got to learn. Oh my God. And of course, he's the Alliance spy and recruiter. And it's important for people to realize that at this point, as we see in Rogue One later on, the Alliance isn't the big cohesive group that we see in A New Hope and Empire and whatever else. They're still all over the place. They're still disorganized. They haven't had any victories yet. Now, this is not working with what we see in Rebels, because if you see the TV show Rebels, our guys in Lothal are having victories all the time. They're blowing up Star Destroyers and all sorts of shit, right? But in the live action scenario, the Alliance is still a splinter group, just bits and pieces of things everywhere. And they're not the happiest group in the world, because in Rogue One, as we see, when they want to attack Scarif, half of them say yes, half of them say no. So I guess for this guy's his point of view, he's trying to just bring people into the fold in the hope that they can get places. And of course, Cassian, as he says later on, is a renowned thief. He can get into Imperial places, as is covered off in episode 3. So I thought that was really interesting. So they've looked at it and said, well, this guy has skills that we can use, but our organization as a whole is still very, very infinitesimal, visible, whatever, still young, right? Yeah. Still building. And they're not what you see later on when A New Hope comes around. So I thought that was really cool. And I think a lot of people will be thinking, the Alliance is big and grand and they've got their bloody X-Wings and they've got their Y-Wings. No, that's not the case at all at this stage. And they're probably not even, and they might even still be on Dantooine for all we know. So they haven't even got the Yavin 4 yet. So yeah,
I think the thing is, before you have an organized alliance, it's more like terrorist cells, and that's probably why Andor says he's done stuff that he hasn't been too proud of, because when you have a smaller organization, the only thing you can do is hit with violence and run away. When you've got a larger organization, that's when you can start the machinations of bringing the Empire down. So we're probably going to see, I would think, more of a terrorist cell type alliance. You see that in Rogue One, where they blow up in the city, and they are like getting people and blowing up tanks, and there's a lot of collateral damage. So that's probably more what the alliance is like in this.
Yep, no, totally agree with you. Yeah, it's exactly right. So, and it's not until they blow up the Death Star that they sort of get into one big cohesive group, and they're all happy bunch of bunnies. So anyway, we've got our green ticks, right? Things that we haven't seen before, all right? So we've got the swearing tick, okay, the dead dude with the eyes open, all that sort of stuff, tick, tick, all these new things that you've never seen in a Star Wars movie or a Star Wars TV series. And then this pops up and you go, here's another green tick, the morning after the night before, right? So I thought, okay, we've got the swearing and all the rest of it. Now we've got the morning after sex scene. I go, and a lady in her underwear. And I go, okay, I didn't see that one coming. I didn't see that one coming. So,
unless she's painted green and got head tails, there's nothing like that in Star Wars, is there?
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, they had a bit of a passion on the night before. And we see what happens the day after. And of course, they don't like hang out and have breakfast together. She just buggers off and, and leaves him. So, good on them for doing it. So, yes, I really like that actually. So, once again, it just grounds everything in the real world. But yeah, for a lot of people go, well, we never saw Han and Leia do this sort of stuff. So,
yes,
hey,
the only reproduction we've seen in Star Wars up until this point is clones.
Yeah, and I think he actually in the extension of that scene, she's even buttoning up her pants and doing the zip and everything. So it's like that could be any show. You look at that and you go, "Is this Sex and the City?" It's like it could be anything. You would never. He said, if you showed that sequence to someone, just that by itself, right? She's got out of bed, and she's put her pants on and zipped that. You go, "What show is this?" No one in a million years would say, "Oh, this is a Star Wars series." Like this is like that is just so far removed from what we used to see. So good on them.
But it was every episode of Battlestar Galactica.
It was indeed. So there you go. Very, very cool. Just getting back to B2. So I was going to say, yeah, I like it when he says, going is a bad idea. So once again, just introduces the personality of the droids. And of course, Cassian's going to see this again with K2SO a bit later on. And it's good. They're not just like 3PO as a protocol droid who just like follows orders. At least, as you said earlier, the droids have their own opinions here and they're free thinking. And that's really good to see.
Yeah, I thought that too. I did think, although it is a slow burn, they have done really well in setting up the characters.
Yep. Now, once again, fan service. Okay, we're looking for it. All right, we're struggling. Okay, we saw a lugger beast earlier. We may have seen the front of a Y-wing. It's like there's not a lot to really sort of work with. Wabani we saw. And then suddenly, for whatever reason, Cassian has a bantha toy in his bedroom.
Yes, well, there's only one person I know that had a bantha toy, and we don't talk about that production.
No, that's right. Good old Lumpy from the holiday special. I just talked about it. So now, first things, because you're into the collecting thing, is that a real one, or is that one they just made up themselves?
No, that's one they've made up. There's been a couple of toy banthas, but that's not any of the ones that were official.
So we can't get off Tatooine, so we'll bring Tatooine to Ferrix. I must admit, I did think about it going, why would he have a bantha toy there? So I'd love to know if there's a story behind all that, but it just, hopefully it's not just the prop department chucking it in for good measure and saying, oh, it'll be a good laugh, the fans will love it. Because as a fan, I thought, that looks freaking stupid. Why would he have one of those there? So
that's our first bantha in the room for this series.
Love it. Absolutely fantastic. All right, so we finally get around to it. Everybody's been waiting for most of this show. So it's a memory from the distant past. She picks up the pole. And, of course, that just brings us right back into the flashbacks. Now I'm going to put these in one big bucket, okay? So we're going to do them together. So it's the Kerry and the Cassat backstory. And, of course, funny enough, I'd said earlier that there are no kids in this show. And, of course, there are kids in this show, which are these kids. But it's the same character, so you can kind of get away with it. Maybe they did this to satisfy the Disney executives. Yes, there are kids in the show. Stop bloody complaining. And that's what they've done. So contractually, they were obligated to put them in. They just happen to use the same character. Now, as you said, and you're not the only one, some people mentioned, why is there no subtitles for this tribal village? And I worked on The View. That was actually intentional, not to put them in. You didn't need to understand the words. It's the inflections of the words and how people physically reacted with each other, right? So if you've got one character who says da-da-da and the other one yells back at them, you didn't need to know what this guy said. You already know that the person responding has said, mate, back in your box. And I really like that, even though you're right, people will be going, where's the subtitles? What are they saying? You don't actually need to know what they're saying. And I actually thought that was kind of cool, considering it's a completely foreign language. So how did you cope with it all?
Well, when I realised there weren't subtitles and pausing it and playing around with the settings to make sure I hadn't switched something off, that was fine. I just did think it was unusual because in Star Wars, we are used to subtitles whenever there's an alien language. And the other thing with the Star Wars universe, they're quite fastidious on getting, language experts to make up every language so the languages are real. So I truly believe whatever they were saying, they had to learn the lines and they were saying something coherent. It'll just take someone to work it all out and put it all up somewhere. I mean, we've seen other series where the day after they've been up, someone has gone and translated all the Arabic graffiti and things. So I'm waiting for someone to find the subtitles. It will probably just be mundane day-to-day stuff that you can work out, though.
It's funny because you are right. The actors would have all had to learn this foreign language that doesn't exist and play it convincingly. And that went a lot of them, like kids as well. That would have been a bit of an ask. And I thought, maybe they've just said, okay, we'll just invent all these jumbly words that don't actually mean anything. Try and get some level of consistency with it. but deliberately not tell the audience what it is that they're saying. Let the actions speak, which is kind of funny because when they're having a conversation, these characters are conversing, and you go, what are they saying? And once again, you have to read the body language to get it. That was an interesting way of dealing with it, because I think you are right. There are going to be people going, what are they saying? Even though it's clear what's going on, right? Just from the way the characters interact with each other rather than what they're saying. So, yeah, it's a very different scenario. Either that or they just couldn't be fag translating. And that's, you know what, if you have if somebody says the word weapon here and then someone else says the word weapon there, and they use two totally different words, right? And the subtitles, they go, well, hang on, that word doesn't match with that word in the subtitles, then people are going to be up in arms. So just don't subtitle it and let them just say what they want. So I don't know.
So I was surprised it got me from left field. It didn't ruin the episode or anything like that, but now I am curious to know exactly what they were saying.
Yeah, see, I didn't need to. I thought, I get it. They're sort of talking to each other, but the body language, you look at everything else. And I thought, yeah, once again, some people go, mate, it's not working for me. And if you're right, if you were listening for visually impaired people, it's not going to help at all. So,
well, the other thing they do in Star Wars, where there's no subtitles, because there are some things like with the Ewoks, for example, you have a character like C-3PO that is translating. And even when I was watching Star Wars as a very young kid, I think I was 5, so I couldn't read what Greedo was saying. The conversation that Han has with Greedo, if you can't read, you still know what's going on because you know what Han is saying. In this, it's just you're in the deep end. You have no idea what they're saying.
Yeah, no, exactly right. I'm going to just move you to your right, Tip, if you wouldn't mind. So you're disappearing off my screen. Yeah. Anyway, so I thought it worked for me. So the first thing you pick up is there's an absence of adults, right? And I thought that was interesting. We learn out later on what's going on. The problem here is trying to work out when this is meant to be. Now, according to the Wikipedia, and Cassian Andor in Rogue One is 26, right? Now, Diego Luna, who's the actor, was in his late 30s at that point, right? Mm-hmm. And I thought 26 is like, that doesn't work for me, which means in this show, which is 5 years prior, he's 21, right? And that in real life, Diego Luna is 42. So that doesn't work for me, which means that from my point of view, I thought the mining accident thing happened during the Republic era before the Clone Wars started. But based on the time frame, when you look at his character and his age, which is roughly about 9 years old, it occurred during the Empire era. And I thought, in my head canon, that doesn't add up. I mean, to hear the time distance should be longer. But anyway, according to them, that's what it is. He's 26 in Rogue One, so he's about 21 in this show, which he looks nothing like 21 at all. So I don't know. What, you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where, they did the same thing in Obi-Wan, where they bring one of the characters back and they don't de-age him, and the other one they do. And you're going, hang on a second, that guy's 20 years older than he should have been. But it's part of the story, so you just got to go with it, kind of thing. Yeah,
so when you look at Cassian in this show, he's 21, and he looks like he's in his 40s. But I mean, he's had a hard life, and maybe he looks older than he's meant to be. Anyway, whatever. Yeah. So it's a bit of an annoying thing. So I thought this was interesting, right? So all the kids, they're getting all excited. They're going on this big adventure, but they've got no idea what they're up against. So the ship has crashed in the distance. They're going to go and check it out, obviously. And I like that. Yeah, he's a very worn 21. Yeah, exactly right. And they've got no idea where they're going and what they're doing, right? They're all as happy as Larry. It's something different, something unique, and you can clearly tell that this is going to bring them undone later on. And of course, this lady here is the leader of the tribe. And I worked on the view that she had to take command after the adults died, right? Because they went to the mines and they carked it. That's how I understand it. And she's in charge. And I actually reckon she was really, really good. Once again, you couldn't understand what she was saying, but you didn't need to. It was all the body language and how they sort of interacted with each other. And for those, I don't know if you picked up on this, but clearly Cassa, as he's known at this point, has a crush on her because he copies the same markings on his chin that she did. So did you pick up on that at all?
No, that's well spotted. I didn't notice that at all. I thought this whole thing had a really interesting backstory. The whole thing where even on the planet, before you're seeing the flashbacks, they're talking about the mining disaster that happened there and how the planet's sealed off. And you think, wow, something big happened there. And then you see all the children, and I'm thinking, did all the parents die? Did they get taken away? Or what happened to the parents? And you don't know yet. And then the coolest thing where they went Jovito on everyone, and they're all using the blow darts.
Blow darts. Yeah. So the fact that all the kids run off to go check out the ship rather than the adults shows that there are no adults. And I'd say the girl probably is like late teens, early 20s, and she's in charge. And I'm going to take a stab in the dark and say it wasn't because she won the poll of being the one in charge. Just like someone had to take command and she got the job.
Yeah.
This is cool. So good old Kerry, last time we get to see her. And because like somehow or other, she grows up and gets off the world, right? Because clearly Cassian's been back to Canary. You would assume he has. And she ain't there. So so somehow or other, she gets off world. But of course, unbeknownst to him, this is the last time he gets to see her, which I thought was kind of groovy. And I had to point this out, even in a big budget science fiction show, I mean, some visual effects do still look pretty crap. And I got to say, this bug looked crap. So did you pick up on that?
I didn't notice that either. I did think it was funny with the society and the kids that some of the kids were not scared and wanted the starships, where you had the little girl running out and waving. And then others of the kids were like, no, don't do that because there'll be repercussions as well. So it is interesting that some of them have been through something and other ones, maybe who are a bit younger, haven't been through or don't remember what happened.
Yeah, I think it just comes down to it's like, it's just something unique and different. And of course, they're a very primitive tribe, funnily enough, like the Ewoks, funnily enough. I couldn't help but draw the comparison here. I looked at this and I go, yeah, West Australia's going to look like this one day. Cool, all the mining that's going on over there. But from Cass's perspective, wouldn't that be like, oh my God, who would have look at? Wouldn't that be a shock to the system seeing the ground like that? Bloody hell.
It was kind of one of those things. It's a trope through a lot of stuff where you see the orcs have done that to the forests in Lord of the Rings, and you have someone stumbling through the edge of the tree line, and it's just destruction and sulfur and mining and things like that. So that was one of those things. I didn't know what was going to happen in the flashbacks, actually. So it was one of those things that was a bit of a surprise. But obviously, they're talking about something's happened on this planet. Do we know what they're mining?
No, I don't think so. No, I don't think it was mentioned anywhere.
Is it going to be gas? Is there going to be some massive gas leak?
I don't know. When the ship crashed, you saw what looked like orange gas coming out of it. But no, I'm not entirely sure. Chrissy said she was the tribal big sister and felt responsible for the younger ones. That's exactly right. Just got the job by default. And I like this. I really did. Like, she's the bravest of the brave, goes into the thing by herself. You can clearly tell she's scared, absolutely witless, but just got to do it. We've got to find out what's going on. Everybody's watching what's happening. And, who knew how this was going to end? So, but no, it was a really interesting moment because I thought you got the dead bodies there and she hits the first one, then hits the second one who then falls out of the gateway. Then the first one wakes up. And, and as you said, out come the blow darts, and it just goes to show how primitive their society and their tribe is, which I thought was kind of groovy. What do you reckon?
Well, that probably proves that the parents or the adults haven't been around for a long time if they evolved long enough to not remember more technology than that. The other thing is, for a Disney movie, this is another first, you don't see kids killed, do you? And
it's funny you should mention that. It's another one. We're ticking green boxes off everywhere. Yeah. Not only is it another dead body that has the eyes open, but it's a female one, and it actually happened on screen. And there's a lot of Star Wars to try and absorb, and I think I cannot remember in live action, because we know what happens in the Clone Wars with the Dathomir sisters. In live action, how often do you see women physically killed on screen, human women? And I was struggling. I really was. So plenty of aliens cop it, but
Rancor.
What? No, Ula wasn't a human though. She's a
Jen Erso in the Death Star explode.
True. Although once again, you don't. Okay. Although it was more like the shockwave that did it, but to see the body afterwards, right? Yeah. That is something you don't see.
After that, Jen Erso didn't have eyes to be open. So.
Yeah, good on you. So I thought, well, this is different.
Yeah.
So I thought, all right, and I can imagine some people, especially younger people, watching this will be like tripping, freaking out, thinking, "Oh shit, this isn't the dumb thing. Well, you don't do this. What would George think of this?" But they've obviously said, "Oh no, the girl's copped it and she died, and we're going to show her dead with the eyes." It's like, okay, did not see that coming at all. And once again, I applaud them for that, going in left field directions, because one of the things that I really, after seeing all the saccharine stuff of Obi-Wan and Book of Boba Fett and friggin' Mandalorian, just put some darkness into it. It won't appeal to everybody, but for those who like something a little different, it could push their buttons. And I must admit, I was very impressed by the fact that they did it and got away with it. So they couldn't have done it if it had been a main character. See, they could never have done that with the girl in the Book of Boba Fett. Fennec Shand gets plugged by, Boba Fett, and then she's dead with the eyes open. It's like, nah, they would never have shown that in the movie.
He'd have taken her, put her in a back to tank, taken her to the fixers and fixed her up and good to go.
Yeah, and you know that this girl who died, she ain't coming back. She's gone. So, I was, well done to them. But, it will freak a few people out. And, of course, that then explains why good old Cassian, or Cassa, as he's known at this point, where his rage is and his hatred and all things authoritarian, I can't say that word. But, of course, he looks back at the ship, and as we discover in the third part, he actually goes inside, and that starts off his other adventure. But, at least we get to see how he came about. So then we jump forward into the present, and that's where we do learn the fight of the tribal adults, as you were talking about in the mining disaster. And that's why I've made a point saying if Cassian is like 9 years old at this point, give or take, it could have occurred in 17 BBY, which is 17 years before A New Hope, or 2 years after Revenge of the Sith. And that's roughly what I sort of worked it on, just pure speculation. What do you reckon?
Yeah. Well, you can't do much else. They don't really give you any more information. I think you've done quite well working out the time. Well,
because I thought if they had gone with his older age, which is what I thought they would have done, it would have occurred in the Republic era. So, around the time between Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones. But clearly that's not the case. Yes. All right. So we're on the ship, right? Our bad guys, the pre-Moors. Oh, my God. Yep. They're going to go to Ferrix and find good old Andor. And I thought, how awesome was this moment, right? So the other dudes come up, done the big spiel. You're going east, you're going west, you're going south. Then good old Khan comes up and absolutely cocks it up big time. And it's like, I loved it. And they're like, he's just clearly just a fish out of water. And he knows he's out of his depth and he knows he's going against orders, right? And it's like, he would be a joke to the troops. How did you find this?
I thought it was great. I loved the character and how he's out of depth. And it's obviously going to be one of those things where this happens and it shames him, so he comes back even harder and gets himself together. I do think it is one of those interesting things when you look at the people that are obviously authoritarian, how they're so for the law and trying to do things by the book and get things done. They often forget about the people they're trying to protect. So they're going after Cassian and all the other people who have done absolutely nothing. If they're in their way, they don't care about that. If this guy cared about who he was meant to be looking after, as well as all the people who he works with, it would have made him a much better character. But ultimately, because he just goes by the book, working as a bureaucrat almost, it's where he's flawed. And that's why I like the character, because nobody's perfect, and you can see how this is going to go. And you already know the next episode's going to be a good one.
Yeah, so you can see from Khan's perspective, he's almost forgotten about the murders that took place, right? He's just now on this relentless mission. Okay, this is what I've got to do. I've got to capture this guy, right? And he's probably already forgotten about the names of the guys who got killed. And, of course, the rest of the troops probably couldn't give a shit about him and wanted to think, that guy who got killed should have died, right? Yeah. Anyway, no one cares. But he's just gone on this, when you got, what do you call it, tunnel vision, right? And you are right. He's going to end up going to the planet and go, you know what, we've got to capture this guy at all costs and almost forget the reason why he's doing it in the first place. So he has to come up with this really dodgy ass speech. And I thought, okay, how's everybody going to react? And I love this. Well said, sir. Inspiring.
The other thing I didn't bring up in the last episode, what was absolutely amazing was, his boss, he goes, okay, this is what probably happened. They went to a bar, they picked on someone, and what he said was exactly what happened.
Yep. Mess with the wrong person. That's right. And had it coming. Yeah, exactly right. Now, I love this, right? Because clearly when Khan spoke to the troops, he knew he was like, it's just not winning them over. But the fact that this guy, whose name I think it's Moss, I think is, said, well, so inspiring. You can see from his expression, right? He's like, mate, how good am I? I've got these dudes in the palm of my hand.
But
very
really,
clever.
He's just had his 2 weeks training and he's about to be sent into the Ukrainian front.
Yeah, that's right too. So because he hasn't been on Ferrix before, and he's completely, it's not going to end well. You can see it coming a mile away. In the interim, the other dude who his name I've forgotten is on the ship on the way in the tram. And for what, he got this big tram sequence, right? I don't know who this dude is. His name's Willie, believe it or not, and not no, he's not from V. And you go, all right, well, there's there more to this dude than what it seems, because they have a bit of a conversation between the two of them. And I thought, okay, and he's into propulsion. Make of that what you will. I don't know. This is something that could easily have ended up on the deleted scene or the cutting room floor, but it wasn't. And what did you make of this?
Well, I was thinking, the other guy was going to go off and he was going to go to his comm unit and he's a snitch or something like that. But he doesn't seem to be.
No.
I did think it was an interesting character to put in because without him having any alliances one way or the other, it just slowed the episode down.
Yeah, it did. And they get off the boat, and I thought, oh, he's going to follow our dude. I forgot his name already, Stellan's character. But he doesn't. He goes a completely different direction. So you do wonder if he's going to pop up again later on. And I go, okay, fair enough. So
Do you know
maybe
what
it was a scene filler. Sometimes when they edit some shows down, they realise, hang on, it's actually too short. We need to put something, so they'll invent a scene, shove it in there just to beef it out. I don't know. Maybe that's what they've done. So.
Do you know what droid has the most thankless job in the universe? The one that when the ship docks, it just rolls up and it's a pair of steps that people walk down and up. I thought that was a nice little touch.
Yeah, and it was just like a red tram too, wasn't it? It was like a train carriage from the friggin' Red Rattlers of the 70s, so which is kind of cool. So we get to see an aerial shot of good old Ferrex. And I'm going to say, I mean, it looked like a favela from Brazil. I mean, it's just no pattern or logic. It's just all been chucked in everywhere. So if you're here and you need to go way over there, you got to go around here, around there, around there, around here. It's like Sydney on a bad day.
You need a Mandalorian backpack to get around, I think.
Isn't that insane? And I don't know what this place is here, because the tower, I think that's the tower there. So I don't know what that big joint is there. That's like a bit of a hotel or something. So
that's the Opera House, Dags.
Yeah, right. So I love it. I thought it was great. You look out the window and you see this world below and you go, oh my God, that is like really, really cool. But I mean, cool, but not cool at the same time. And the final shot, as you mentioned, he's walking to the camera. This is Cassian, and they had rock music. As you were talking about the music earlier on. He's going, mate, he's going hardcore with the guitars and the drums and the whole bit. It's like far out.
Not only did they have rock music, but they had it was the sparks from like our arc welding or grinding going on as well. So it was really a heavy metal music clip.
Yeah, it was actually. And of course, that led us straight into episode 3, which is particularly interesting. Was there a competition to appear in the show? What was it that really reminded me of? I don't know. Not that I'm aware of. But I'll tell you what, if you won a competition and you didn't just appear as a background extra, but you actually had a bit part and you actually had dialogue and everything, that's a damn good competition to win. What can I say, eh? Christy, now that you're with us, can you give us your Crimson Yawns for the 2 episodes together, please? So if you wouldn't mind, and give us your rating on the show. And just very quickly before I get back to you, dude, if you are wondering out there, fans, when are we going to talk about part 3? That will be tomorrow. Although I'll be on my own. Mr. Aaron is nicking off for the day. But yes, that's when we'll cover off part 3, which really did put the show back on track and got a lot of people very excited.
Yeah,
very good.
I'm sad I'm not around tomorrow because part 3 for me, if you watch this over all 3 episodes at once when it dropped, I do think by including part 3 in it, it probably overall helped the first 2 parts.
Yep, totally agree. All right, so parts 1 and 2, what did you think, old son? I know you sort of covered off part 1 a little bit, but now that we've got the 2 of them together.
Look, I would probably say the weakest start for me of a Star Wars movie. It's interesting because there are a lot of good things in it, but it hasn't really gelled at this point, and there's not a lot of action, and not much happens in that apart from looking for his sister. Not really much plot is going on. It's a very, very simple story so far. So for me, it was an average episode. Maybe if you take those first 2 episodes, maybe just a 5 out of 10 for me.
All right, cool. And so just, Christy, just to confirm, the more yawns, the worse it is. The less yawns, the better it is. So I just want to make sure we got that because I got your yawns just there. Yes, it's the pacing of it is, you're right. It is slow as a wet week. Maybe it's a little bit too much to put in there. As we mentioned earlier, it's definitely a show that needs a couple of viewings. You can't absorb it all the first time around. It's just too much. It's just too new, too different. And thanks, Christy, if you could just change that for me. But I can see a lot of people just in the future saying, just bypass those 2, go straight to number 3. And I agree with you. Number 3 is where it all picks up. So maybe they could have condensed 1 or 2 into a single episode. There's certainly bits in what we saw in episode 2. You know what? You could probably remove that and it wouldn't have been a big deal. But
a yardstick for me is my wife, who some people know is not a big sci-fi fan, but will watch all this stuff with me. Watched all of Boba Fett, watched all of the Mandalorian, watched all of Kenobi, absolutely fine. We got an episode and a half into this and she just said, what is this I'm watching? What is meant to be happening? And I can imagine a lot of the audience would have been thinking the same thing.
Totally agree. So Christy's getting so the Cruise and Yawns. It's a bit of a running joke that we've got. So the more yawns it is, the more yawns, the worse it is. So this effectively a 2 out of 10 for the most part, 2 to 3 out of 10 for the series. So yeah, for Christy it clearly didn't work. For myself, I would say that even though it's slow and it's clearly not gripping, and it takes a long time to get anywhere, I really appreciate what they've done in other areas with the world building, the character design, the fact that they've done things they've never done before, which have really appealed to me. Taken the flaws out of it, which is just the pacing. The pacing is the only thing that's just letting it down, and the fact there's a lot of dialogue and a lot to absorb. As I said earlier, I would actually go for a 7 out of 10 because it really worked for me, but I can see where the flaws are, and I certainly agree with you. There are a lot of people who are not going to dial into this at all. Where are the lightsabers? Where are the Grogu's? Where's the spaceships? There's like hardly any of that stuff happening as yet. That's why I think they needed to drop their 3 episodes at once. Yep.
Here's something I wanted to ask you, and I've waited till you're on air to do it because we haven't discussed this yet. I had the viewing experience where I watched it with my wife, who's not so much of a big fan. You had the viewing experience where you watched it with a group of diehard fans. What was the buzz for you? Was it a good buzz, or was it a bit of a, oh, what's happening here?
For the first 2 episodes, it was definitely got to the end credits and like nobody really knew what to say. I think we're all saying, I was with 4 other people, 4 other people, and we're all thinking we could see where it's going, but it's kind of not getting there. It wasn't until we had the 3rd episode that we really go, oh, that's great, it's fantastic. So I think there was definitely a surprise to go, it's good, but it's missing something. And I don't know if that'll come back and bite the series in the bum later on when people go, you know what, that just dragged. We've lost audience members already. People have already dropped off. I already know a couple of people who couldn't stand it. They thought it was bloody terrible for that reason. So it's maybe they've made something different, but they've made it too different. And I think that's working against it. Having said that, if you can jump on board with it and go, you know what, I don't mind a bit of slow pacing. It's a bit of a slow build-up. It's a bit of a slow grind, but the payoff will be worth it. I think that's a cool thing. And for me, I could get that, especially in the second viewing. So, yeah, it worked for me. But I was looking for something different, and I can't stand stuff that's too saccharine, too sweet, too predictable. And I found there was enough unpredictability in this to push my button. So I was pretty happy with that. So
the other thing that I found interesting with this is all the Star Wars series have been very formulaic on Disney. Not in the plot, but in the beats. And so at the end of the first episode, there's a reveal of a legacy character. The end of the second episode, there's a reveal of another legacy character or something like that. This sidestepped that totally. There was, like you were saying, there was no fan service where at the end of the episode, oh my goodness, it's Chewbacca. Nothing like that. You know? So,
and I really love that. I really respect it. So Tracy made a point of saying it's a reflection of today's society of instant gratification that is affecting people. Yeah, I totally agree with you. Yes, there would have been people like 20 minutes in or 10 minutes in, even 5 seconds in going, where's Grogu? Where are the lightsabers? Turn off, right? And that's it. As you've said, it's their opinion. So, yeah, exactly right. And I think Tracy's also said, why it attracts me, sometimes you don't need to be hit with a sledgehammer. Yeah, I totally agree with you too. So, yes, but I do agree with Christy as well that it's just too slow and different. The too slow, definitely, and the too different, probably. So I get it. I do get it. But yes, for me, it worked for me. So yeah.
Can you imagine, though, if I pitched this to you as a series and said, they're going to make a television version of Blade Runner, and it's about Deckard looking for his sister, and you could have watched the first 2 episodes of this and you go, yeah, this is really good.
Yeah. I think the payoff is definitely going to be there. It's just that, anyway, it started and it does pick up. So maybe you class the first 2 episodes as being a bit of a hump on the road. But all things being equal, if you wanted to say, oh, there's a hump on the road for the first 2 episodes because they're a bit slow, they're nowhere near as bad as what we saw in the Book of Boba Fett with the friggin' mod squad and the Vespers. And that was shit, right? There's nothing about these episodes, the first 1 and 2, which is garbage or rubbish. It's just pacing, right? Yes. The rest of it is outstanding. Okay, so if there's any faults, it's just how fast it goes. The quality is outstanding. And I think there's a fair bit to be said out of that. So, and the fact that it's unpredictable is a huge button pusher for a lot of people. So Tracy's dialed into it. I'm dialed into it. And hopefully a few people will jump on board, but obviously not everybody will.
And I can tell you from watching the first couple of episodes, we aren't going to get a mod squad in this. That ain't happening.
No. And all things being equal, you're saying like your wife, Janelle, didn't really go for it, but she's not the target audience. You're the target audience. She's not, right? People on the street who just watch Star Wars, this is a bit of a pastime. They're not the target audience. The hardcore fans are the target audience, even though it won't appeal to all of them. So, yeah, very good.
The first 2 episodes were a bump in the road.
Yeah, but it's only a small bump, right? So it's yeah,
bump in the road.
Bump at the rogue. Yeah, very, very good. Just quickly, sounds interesting for being so different. Might be a while before we get to see. Cool listening to you guys review on these new series. Yep, absolutely fantastic. The good news is that when we get to episode 3, it really kicks into a higher gear, right? It's not like it goes down, it goes up. And we'll be covering that off tomorrow night. Absolutely fantastic. Anyway, look, it's an hour. We're an hour and a half into it. We're going to wrap this one up now. It's been a good conversation. For those who don't know, don't forget to check out our socials, all Sci-Fi Zone, and good old Instagram and Twitters and whatever else. It's all very, very exciting. I personally will be back tomorrow night without my dear friend Aaron to talk about part 3, which is actually like very, very unfortunate that you won't be here. But we'll go and check it out and we'll see what happens. What do you reckon, Mr. Aaron?
I thought it was a great episode too. So
yeah.
I'll rewatch the show and be interested to see what you say.
Very, very cool. Oh, you know what I'll be saying? I was saying, if only Aaron was here to tell me what he thought. Oh, Aaron, where are you? Oh, like he's not there. Oh, that's what I'll be saying. I'll just be dangling all these carrots in front of your old son. So very, very cool. All right, we're going to buzz off. We're going to leave you to it. I will see everybody tomorrow with a bit of luck for to review episode 3 of the series. And we'll be back next week to talk about episode 4, both Aaron and I. So very, very cool. Any final words before we go?
No, it's an interesting series. I hope everyone sticks with it because it is worth sticking with it and not getting put by the first 2 episodes.
And if you want to see dead dudes, make sure the eyes are open. Whether it be male or female. Yeah, how good is that? All right, we'll leave you to a party hard rock on and enjoy the rest of the night. Okay, take care.
Good night, guys.